From the past 35 years, between 1986 and 2021, America executed 15 female serial killers in death row history. In this video, we'll examine their crimes, final meals, and last words that echoed through the chambers. This is Sin, Crime and Silence Records. Anna Marie Hahn. State of execution, Ohio. Between 1933 and 1937, Anna Marie Hahn poisoned at least 5 elderly men in Cincinnati, Ohio. She targeted lonely German-speaking men, offering companionship and care while slowly administering arsenic through food and medicine. Her motive was financial. She secured loans, insurance benefits, and inheritances from the victims she killed. Hahn's crimes came to light after the suspicious death of Ernst Kohler, whose body emitted a strong odor during a train transport from Colorado to Ohio. An investigation led to multiple exhumations. High levels of arsenic were found in the remains of her other victims, including Jacob Wagner and George Selman. Hahn was arrested in August 1937 and did not confess to the murders. During her trial in Cincinnati, Hahn was found guilty of first-degree murder. The prosecution presented evidence of forged documents, financial gain, and toxicology reports. The jury took less than 3 hours to convict her. Appeals were denied, and she was sentenced to death. Hahn spent over a year on death row. Prison officials described her as quiet and reserved. She showed no major personal changes and maintained her innocence throughout. There was no formal diagnosis of mental illness, and no confirmed expressions of remorse. On December 7, 1938, Hahn was served her final meal: chicken, fried potatoes, cabbage salad, and coffee. She spent her last hours with family and a priest. Her 12-year-old son visited briefly before her execution. Anna Marie Hahn was executed in the electric chair at the Ohio Penitentiary. She was pronounced dead at 8:13 a.m. on December 7, 1938. Her final words were reportedly, "Please forgive me. Father, have mercy on me." Louise Peete. State of execution, California. In 1944, Louise Peete murdered Margaret Logan in Pacific Palisades, California. Trusted as a caretaker while Margaret's husband was institutionalized, Peete buried Margaret's body in the backyard and began stealing from the estate, forging documents to access pension checks and valuables. The crime revealed a disturbing pattern of manipulation and betrayal. Peete was arrested in 1945 after Margaret Logan's body was discovered. Though she denied the murder, investigators found forged checks, stolen property, and direct links to the burial site. Her criminal history included a prior murder in 1920 for which she had served 18 years. This made her one of the rare female repeat murderers in U.S. history. Peete was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. During the trial in Los Angeles, the prosecution emphasized her calculated pattern of killing for money. The jury deliberated briefly before delivering a guilty verdict. Appeals were filed but failed. Peete spent nearly 2 years on death row at San Quentin. Reports described her demeanor as cold and composed. She showed no remorse and continued to claim innocence despite overwhelming evidence. On April 11, 1947, Peete was served her last meal, though specific items were not recorded. She met with a spiritual advisor before her execution. There were no known visits from family. Louise Peete was executed in the gas chamber at San Quentin State Prison on April 11, 1947. She was declared dead at 10:03 a.m. Her final words were not publicly recorded. Mary Frances Creighton. State of execution, New York. In 1935, Mary Frances Creighton was arrested in New York for poisoning Everett Applegate's wife, Ada, with rat poison mixed into a cocktail. The motive was to clear the way for her daughter to marry Everett. The case shocked authorities when it was revealed that this wasn't her first suspected murder. Creighton had previously been tried for the 1923 arsenic poisoning of her disabled brother and the 1925 death of her mother-in-law. She was also suspected in the suspicious death of her own husband, Ray Creighton, in 1923. Despite multiple investigations, she had escaped conviction until the death of Ada Applegate. In 1935, Creighton was finally charged and convicted of first-degree murder for Ada's death. The prosecution presented evidence that Creighton had laced a cocktail with poison and administered it to Ada while staying in the same home. This time, the jury deliberated only a short while before returning a guilty verdict. Creighton was sent to Sing Sing prison, where she remained for several months on death row. Observers described her as detached and calm. There were no reported emotional breakdowns, signs of remorse, or last-minute appeals for clemency. On July 16, 1936, Mary Frances Creighton was served a simple final meal. Her specific request was not recorded. She reportedly spoke little in her final hours and received no known visitors besides clergy. She was executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing prison on July 16, 1936. Death was pronounced shortly after 11 a.m. Creighton's final words were, "I have nothing to say." Velma Barfield. State of execution, North Carolina. In 1978, Velma Barfield poisoned her fiancé, Stuart Taylor, in North Carolina by lacing his beer with arsenic-based rat poison. His sudden death raised suspicions when autopsy results revealed traces of the toxin. As the investigation deepened, Barfield was linked to a disturbing pattern of similar deaths over several years. Authorities reopened cases involving the deaths of Barfield's mother, two elderly people she had worked for as a caretaker, and her first husband. All had died under suspicious circumstances, often following symptoms consistent with poisoning. Barfield eventually confessed to killing 4 people, including her fiancé, using arsenic-laced food and drink. She was arrested in 1978 and later convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Stuart Taylor. During her trial, the prosecution presented her written confession, autopsy reports, and witness testimony. The jury found her guilty and sentenced her to death. Barfield spent 6 years on death row at the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women. While incarcerated, she became a born-again Christian and was described by prison staff as deeply religious and remorseful. She participated in Bible study, ministered to fellow inmates, and corresponded with spiritual leaders. On November 2, 1984, Velma Barfield was served her final meal, a bag of cheese doodles and a can of Coca-Cola. She spent her final hours praying and meeting with her pastor. There were no reported family visits. Velma Barfield was executed by lethal injection at Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina, on November 2, 1984. She was pronounced dead at 2:15 a.m. Her final words were, "I'm sorry for what I've done." Judy Benoano. State of execution, Florida. In 1983, Judy Benoano was arrested in Florida after her fiancé, John Gentry, survived a car bombing in Pensacola. The investigation into the attempted murder uncovered a chilling series of deaths linked to Benoano, including the poisoning of her husband in 1971 and the drowning of her partially paralyzed son in 1980. Authorities determined that Benoano had given her husband, James Goodyear, arsenic-laced food shortly after he returned from military duty. His death was initially ruled natural until the later pattern emerged. 9 years later, her son, Michael, who had become paralyzed due to arsenic poisoning, drowned during a canoe trip with her. Life insurance payouts followed each death. In 1983, Benoano gave John Gentry vitamin capsules laced with arsenic, causing him to fall ill. When poisoning failed, she planted a car bomb in his vehicle. He survived the explosion, and her plan unraveled. Investigators exhumed Goodyear's body and found arsenic. She was charged with multiple murders and attempted murder. Benoano was convicted of first-degree murder in 1984 for killing her husband. She was later convicted for the murder of her son and the attempted murder of Gentry. Prosecutors described her as cold and calculating, motivated by financial gain. The jury sentenced her to death. She spent over a decade on death row at Broward Correctional Institution. Prison staff described her as quiet and disciplined. There were no signs of remorse. She maintained her innocence until the end. On March 30, 1998, Judy Benoano declined a special last meal and was served the standard prison fare. She spent her final hours in isolation, with a brief visit from her spiritual advisor. No family members visited. Judy Benoano was executed by electrocution at Florida State Prison on March 30, 1998. She was pronounced dead at 7:13 a.m. She offered no final words. Aileen Wuornos. State of execution, Florida. Between 1989 and 1990, Aileen Wuornos shot and killed 7 men across Central Florida. Working as a hitchhiking sex worker, she lured victims from highways and rest stops before murdering them with a .22 caliber pistol and stealing their cars and valuables. The killings spanned multiple counties and drew national attention. Wuornos was arrested in January 1991 after police traced a car belonging to one of the victims, Peter Seams, to her and her companion, Tyria Moore. Fingerprints and personal items linked her to several crime scenes. She eventually confessed to the murders, claiming they were committed in self-defense against men who attempted to rape or assault her. In 1992, Wuornos was convicted of the murder of Richard Mallory and sentenced to death. She later pleaded no contest to several additional murders, receiving multiple death sentences. Prosecutors presented ballistic evidence, witness testimony, and her taped confessions. Despite defense arguments about her mental health and traumatic past, the court upheld her convictions. Wuornos spent over a decade on death row at Florida's Broward Correctional Institution. During that time, she displayed erratic behavior, made paranoid claims, and gave several interviews. She later dropped all appeals and requested to be executed, stating that she wanted to get off death row. On October 9, 2002, Aileen Wuornos declined a special last meal and was given a cup of coffee instead. She spent her final hours alone, with no visitors. She was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison on October 9, 2002. Death was pronounced at 9:47 a.m. Wuornos's final words were, "I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th. Like the movie, big mothership and all. I'll be back." Martha Beck. State of execution, New York. Between 1947 and 1949, Martha Beck and her partner, Raymond Fernandez, posed as a couple seeking companionship through newspaper personal ads. Under the guise of romantic interest, they lured lonely women, swindled them, and in several cases, murdered them. The press dubbed them the Lonely Hearts Killers. The pair's killing spree ended in 1949 when authorities arrested them in Michigan after the discovery of the bodies of Delphine Downing and her young daughter. Beck and Fernandez had stayed in Downing's home, poisoned her, then shot her when she didn't die fast enough. They also drowned her 2-year-old daughter days later to cover up the crime. Following their arrest, Beck confessed to the crimes, stating she acted out of love for Fernandez. The investigation linked them to multiple murders across several states. Authorities charged them with the New York murder of Janet Fay, a wealthy widow bludgeoned to death in 1949 after becoming suspicious of the couple's intentions. Beck and Fernandez were extradited to New York and tried for Fay's murder. The prosecution presented confessions, letters, and physical evidence. Both were convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. Martha Beck spent nearly 2 years on death row at Sing Sing prison. Reports described her as emotionally volatile, often expressing obsessive devotion to Fernandez. She showed little remorse for the victims, focusing instead on her relationship with him. On March 8, 1951, Martha Beck ate a simple prison-issued meal. She did not request anything special. She spent her final hours with prison clergy. No family visited. Martha Beck was executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing prison on March 8, 1951. She was pronounced dead at 11:15 a.m., minutes after Fernandez was executed in the same chair. Her final words were, "My story is a love story." If you find these true crime stories gripping, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more chilling cases just like this. New stories drop weekly. Stay tuned. Rhonda Bell Martin. State of execution, Alabama. Between the 1930s and 1950s, Rhonda Bell Martin poisoned several of her family members in Alabama. Over the course of 2 decades, 5 of her children, her mother, and 2 husbands died under suspicious circumstances. She used arsenic, administered gradually through food and drink, to carry out the killings. Martin's crimes went undetected for years until her 4th husband, Claude Martin, fell ill in 1951 and survived the poisoning. An investigation followed, leading to the exhumation of several family members. Toxicology reports confirmed the presence of arsenic in the bodies. When questioned, Martin confessed to poisoning 7 people, though she claimed she didn't know why she did it. In 1956, Martin was convicted of first-degree murder for the death of Claude Martin. The trial focused on her written confession, the forensic evidence, and a long pattern of unexplained deaths surrounding her. The jury found her guilty and sentenced her to death. Martin spent just over a year on death row at Kilby Prison. She was described as quiet and cooperative. During her incarceration, she wrote letters expressing confusion and regret but did not offer a clear motive. She requested that her body be donated to science and even asked for her spinal cord to be studied to understand her actions. On October 11, 1957, Martin was served a simple last meal. Specific items were not recorded. She spent her final hours in prayer and met with a chaplain. There were no known visits from family members. Rhonda Bell Martin was executed in the electric chair at Kilby Prison in Montgomery, Alabama, on October 11, 1957. She was pronounced dead at 12:10 a.m. Her final words were, "My last words and wish is for Claude to forgive me." Lavinia Fisher. State of execution: South Carolina. In the early 1800s, Lavinia Fisher and her husband, John Fisher, operated an inn just outside Charleston, South Carolina. They gained infamy after multiple travelers went missing in the area. Rumors spread that the couple poisoned and robbed their guests, serving tea laced with a sedative before killing them and stealing their belongings. Although no murder convictions were secured, Lavinia Fisher became widely known as America's first alleged female serial killer. In 1819, authorities raided the Fishers' inn after a man named John Peoples escaped and reported that Lavinia had tried to make him drink suspicious tea and insisted he sleep in a specific chair. His suspicions led him to flee, triggering an investigation that uncovered evidence of robbery and possible foul play, though no bodies were ever conclusively linked to the inn. Lavinia and John Fisher were arrested and charged with highway robbery, a capital offense at the time. During the trial, witnesses testified about their criminal activities. Though public interest centered on the murder rumors, the court found them guilty of robbery. They were sentenced to death. Lavinia Fisher spent nearly a year at the Old City Jail in Charleston. She reportedly showed defiance during her imprisonment and never admitted guilt. Her reputation as a cold and fearless figure grew in the public imagination. On February 18, 1820, Lavinia Fisher was led to the gallows behind the jail. She wore her wedding dress and reportedly screamed to the crowd, "If any of you have a message for the devil, tell me now, for I shall be seeing him shortly." Lavinia Fisher was hanged alongside her husband at the Old City Jail. She was declared dead shortly after noon. Her final words were bold and defiant. "Save me your pity. I'll have none of it." Sarah Jane Whiteling. State of execution: Pennsylvania. Between March and May of 1888, Sarah Jane Whiteling poisoned her husband and 2 children in Philadelphia using arsenic. She murdered her husband, John, first, then her 8-year-old daughter, Bertha, and finally her young son, Willie. Authorities later discovered she had taken out small life insurance policies on each of them. The deaths occurred over a short 3-month span. Each time, the victims suffered painful illnesses that appeared sudden and mysterious. When Willie died just days after recovering from a prior illness, suspicions rose. Investigators ordered the exhumation of the bodies, and toxicology confirmed the presence of arsenic. Whiteling was arrested in June 1888. During questioning, she confessed to the murders, stating she feared her husband would corrupt the children and that she wanted to protect them, though evidence suggested financial gain was her primary motive. She showed little emotion during the investigation. In 1889, Whiteling was convicted of first-degree murder for all 3 deaths. The court was presented with her confession, insurance documents, and medical testimony. She was sentenced to death, becoming the first woman to receive a capital sentence in Philadelphia County. Whiteling spent a year on death row at Moyamensing Prison. Reports described her as calm and withdrawn. She read the Bible daily and was often seen praying. Clergy visited her regularly. She made no effort to appeal her sentence. On June 25, 1889, Sarah Jane Whiteling ate a simple final meal, reportedly without comment. She spent her last hours in quiet reflection with a minister by her side. No family visited her. Sarah Jane Whiteling was hanged at Moyamensing Prison in Philadelphia on June 25, 1889. She was pronounced dead at 10:15 a.m. Her final words were, "I am ready. May God have mercy on my soul." These were the final words, final meals, and final moments of America's most notorious female serial killers executed on death row. Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you believe stories like these should never be forgotten, subscribe to the channel. This is Sin, Crime, and Silence Records.